Welcome to the Analyzation Show. I'm here live with Cindy-Ann Boisson, and this is my first time actually doing a live episode, so I'm really excited to have her on. Cindy-Ann, where are we today?
Today we are at Tobago, Trini Kitchen, which is a Trinidadian restaurant in North Lauderdale.
And, you are my good friend. I could introduce you with like the longest introduction. How would you describe yourself and introducing yourself to listeners and to the audience?
Oh my gosh, I would say my government recognized name is Cindy-Ann Jane Boisson. I was born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm a stand-up comedian, storyteller, actor, and fashionista.
So, Trinidad and Tobago. Not everyone knows where that is, about Trinidad and Tobago. So tell me a little bit about Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, so Trinidad and Tobago is a twin island republic. We are situated very close to South America, like we're the most southern of the Caribbean islands. We have a population of about 1.3 million. We've produced the first Black Miss Universe ever.
Shout out.
Shout out. And our carnival is world-renowned. It's one of the best carnivals in the world. A lot of little countries actually use our carnival as a template for their carnival. And it ends the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday. So it precedes Lent. So it was just finished. We have steel pan.
A country that loves to celebrate.
A country that loves to celebrate, full of flavor and a lot of rum, a lot of music.
Oh my God! Well, everything that I've learned about Trinidad and Tobago in our couple years of friendship is that y'all love to celebrate. So that makes sense.
We do. So we have the best carnival. Trinidad is the bigger of the two islands, and then Tobago it's smaller. It's more touristy, and Trini, I would say, is where there's a lot. It's more built up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, you've been in the United States and Florida for a while. If you don't mind me asking, what brought you from Trinidad and Tobago over to the United States?
What brought me here? I guess my son. It is. My son brought me here, actually.
Yes, she is a mother. Again, she looks like we're sisters. We look like we're the same age. But
my son, back in 2010, actually, I came here before 2010. I was here in 2005 for different reasons. Mm-hmm. And in 2010, I moved for my son. He used to swim competitively for Trinidad and Tobago. He represented Trinidad and Tobago, and he was like, Mom, he had discovered through some research about a coach here in Coral Springs, and he wanted that opportunity to, to just get a swim scholarship, and he wanted to be part of a bigger pool of swimmers, and he thought this was a good idea, and I was like, unwillingly, I agreed, and so we're here. It's been 14 years.
Wow. I mean, there is so much. In general, when you talk about being a mother, there's a lot of sacrifice. A lot of times when you talk about immigrating somewhere, there's a lot of sacrifice. And I mean, your story encapsulates both of those things. I mean, it's so incredible. So much love for him.
Too much, some would argue. Well, back then, it has changed. The love has subsided tremendously. But there's still some love, but not as much as before.
But you started comedy when?
I started comedy 2013. 2014. June 30th, 2014 was when I performed for the first time at the Hard Rock. Back then, you remember when they used to have...
That was actually where I met you. Not that... I don't think it was that day, because it wouldn't have been 2014. For me, it would have been 2015, I think was my first time on stage, or 2016.
At that same Hard Rock.
But I met you at that Hard Rock, at the New Faces. And that was where I met you, by like the bar.
Right.
And you were in all white, I believe. I think you were in all white.
Possibly.
And you I think you went up last that night, and you talked about your neighbor. That's what I remember.
The neighbor who said she didn't know that she never had a black. I'm her first black friend.
Yes, that's I remember.
That's been one of my best jokes. I mean, even now, 10 years later, it still slams.
So, I mean, do you want to tell us a little bit about the story behind the joke for those who don't know? And maybe we'll pull up a clip for it.
It was because coming from Trinidad and Tobago, I had never been called black in my life, right? And I talk about it in my comedy. So if you've ever seen me in comedy, you would know about it.
And if you haven't, you need to see
You should. And also, if you're familiar with the Caribbean and colorism and stuff, you would know. So I moved here in 2010, and my neighbor's all American, white girl. And so we would go for daily walks. You know, we'd go running, we'll walk together. And so one day she says to me, she's like, you know, I have to tell you, you're my first black friend. And I thought, and she goes, well, you're not black. And I thought, what does that even mean? You know, those were like, I mean, I did this joke. The first time I did this joke, there was this guy, a comedian, I think, I don't remember if he performed, but he was at the show. And a black American guy, and he was really angry. He took offense to it. And I was like, you know, and he said some very unkind things to me. And I was like, well, I'm not denying that I'm black. I know that's not what this means. It's just hearing it and also understand my culture and understand where I am coming from as well. I'm not denying that. Of course, I know who I am. But to hear someone say it, that way I was like, okay, this is interesting. And we joke about it all the time, you know, and I end the joke very differently, which I don't show because that's where real people back in, because people think I'm going to say something, but I say something else, which is comedy, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole
So, so that's what happened. And we're still friends today. We still joke about it today. And I remain black today. I'm still black.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed.
So you came to comedy, and you came to the United States for your son. This huge sacrifice. You came to comedy when he grew up a little bit. Mm-hmm. What was it like discovering something for yourself like that? Were you always into performing? How did it come to you? How did it come to you? How did you come to it?
I always loved. I loved storytelling from a child. As a child, I would tell some really good stories. I loved essay writing. I loved, creative writing and stuff like that. Before I moved, I had done some theater back home, not stand-up comedy. I was actually part of a play written and produced by Wendell Etienne. I was the lead female actor in the play. I had a lot of fun. And I remember before I moved, I said to him after the show, I was like, I want to try stand-up comedy. And he said, let's do it. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm moving. So that would have been 2009.
Oh, wow. So it was always an idea.
Yeah. I was like, I think I can do it. But comedy back home and comedy here is very different. Stand-up comedy. It's very different. And
how so?
Well, home, it's more like old talk. What we call home shit talk, more storytelling. So the structure of it is very different. So before I got on stage for the first time, I looked up like a class to do stand-up comedy, which is where I did my first show. I actually did a stand-up comedy workshop for two reasons. I wanted to see how is it done here, and also I wanted to know if people would understand my accent and relate to my style of comedy. And so I did, I think the course is 6 weeks, and then you graduate at the end of it. And it was also a coping mechanism for me, because now my son had left. I had spent my entire life and lived for him, did everything for him, and I shelved so many of the things I wanted to do. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this thing, figure out my next move. Am I staying in this country? I never planned on being here more than 3-4 years.
Wow.
I never. I was so sure I would be back home now, just living the life, I love Trinidad and Tobago. I can't say anything ill about it, but life happens. you know, and so I've been here 14 years and making that adjustment. Comedy has become my safe haven.
And I wonder if they can turn it down a little bit on the music.
Can you turn the music down a little bit more?
Yeah, just because I'm hearing it, and if we want to cut around, it'll be like
maybe copyright things.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's just more with like cutting around it. Okay, yeah, that's good. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah.
If I end up keeping this as a continuous recording, we are actually live at a Trini kitchen. If you're hearing any background noise, I mean, we're being transported in. To Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, exactly. Cheers. So what are we drinking here?
This is called Chill. It's from Angostura. This is lemon, lime and bitters.
Oh, yes.
And I don't know,
okay,
you're having, that's a new flavor that I haven't tried.
Oh, a new flavor. So is this something that, is this like kind of soda that you grew up with? Or is this, no, is this new?
Isn't something, it's fairly new. This one has been around
since 1824, kind of, not that new.
No, maybe Angostura, the company. Well, Angostura is, have you ever heard about bitters?
Educate me.
It's like an essence, like a what do you call it? Like a spice, a essence that people use. They use it in cakes. It's not just used in Trini. I think it's an essence. Now I'm sounding a little like if I don't know exactly what it is.
It's okay. We can.
But it is an essence.
We can use like AI to fix it. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, that is like very, very good.
Yeah.
That is
good. It's
that
refreshing.
This is my new favorite.
Yeah,
thing.
it's refreshing.
And I also love the fact that, for sustainability is a big thing for me. So glass bottle, paper straw, love it. Love
wooden
this energy.
tables.
Yes. All the nature. So, I mean, finding something for you, I think is so important. I am not a mother yet, but I have a mother, and I've seen her sacrifice for me. I'm in this point where I'm thinking about having kids, and I reveal.
You heard it here first.
Yes. Breaking news. But it's one of these things where people don't really understand like that idea of getting lost in it. And I've seen it with my own mother, and I've told her before, I'm like, you need to find like a hobby, something for you. I mean, what was your point that you hit where you're like, I really need to find something for me?
When we finalized college and I realized, okay, what am I going to do? I just couldn't figure out what my life would look like outside of chlorine and a swimming pool and a trunks and goggles and racing from one meet to the other. And I was like, what am I going to do with all this time and energy and anxiety? And I figured, okay, I'll try. Comedy wasn't the first thing I tried. I started doing... I went to boot camp. I started really working out. I didn't come from a family that exercised a lot. So I was like, all right, let me try this thing called exercise. So I joined a boot camp club. I started doing I did those color runs.
Yeah.
I was just searching for stuff. I think I joined a book club. I joined a meetup group. There's a thing called meetup group, right? And so I would go to improv. I mean, just searching. And I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to do stand-up comedy. I looked it up. I found it. I enrolled. But I spent a long time feeling very sad. And I joke about it a lot. And I said, I don't care and I don't give a shit. But that's just, that's comedy. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
A part of me didn't care. And I was really happy to see the back of him.
And not have to be in a pool every
not
day.
have to be in a pool and not have to live my life and da-da-da-da-da. But there was a huge part of me that felt this void, I have to find something to fill it. And comedy has been that. So
it's interesting you talk about this period of discovery because I can relate. I think this is where you and I connect a lot, where it's we see the value of finding purpose.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't because it's hard. Like, who has the time?
Yeah.
I mean, and of course, it was easier for you once your son left, but it is this interesting thing about having to try out these different things and find out different things. It's so funny because I also relate on the exercise note, but in a reverse way, because I had stopped doing comedy. And after I stopped doing comedy, I'm like, well, what do I do now? Because you have a whole, it's not just when you're performing, it's not just about you, you're a part of a community. And that community, no one really has the time to get together outside. This is like the first time we've gotten together
for years.
comedy. Yeah. No one really has the time. So it's this thing where it's like, okay, well, now what? So now searching into different places, it's the same thing with the exercise. I related so hard because for me, I didn't grow up in a family that did 5K runs, turkey trot or anything like that.
None of it.
My parents would come home from work and be tired. They'd be like, why am I going to work more? Make myself more tired. And it's funny because as a kid, I would be like, oh, because every time you see a Russian in a movie, they're like a spy or something. And like, are we spies? And then I'm like, no, we are just not physically fitted for that.
And add to that, terrible eating habits.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Although this is so delicious. This is not terrible.
Yeah, this isn't bad.
Yeah, I'm excited to try some Trini food. I want to make sure that we're in focus. Yes, we're still looking good. Still looking fabulous.
Still look good.
This is like a one-woman band. I brought my camera here and Sydney and saw me set this up. So you found comedy, and now you've really found your footing in this place where now you're driving toward a one-woman show. So tell me a little bit about your one-woman show.
When I did my show in 2022, because I produce shows as well, and so I produce a show once a year. It's the production is called Mauvais Lang, and it's usually I headline, and the purpose of it was and is to introduce parts of the comedy community to the Trini community, and have the Trini and Caribbean community because a lot of people don't venture out to comedy clubs, so that I bring that to them, and I allow my comedy community to meet some of my diaspora. So I had done that since, I think the first show I did was 2016, and I would headline and we'd have a good time. After my last show in 2022, I realized that there were things I wanted to talk about that wasn't necessarily funny, and so there was no punchline set up, and I was like, I need to find a way to bring this home. And I had done some research, and I realized, I can do a one-woman show where it can show my range. I'm also a trained actor because I've studied acting, I've gone to school for acting, and I'm like, let me sort of tap into that and bring it together and see if people receive that part of me, because it's not just, I call it a dramedy.
Yes.
Yeah, because I can't help but be funny, but there are also some things that I want to talk about that I just couldn't fit into a usual stand-up comedy routine.
Yes. So, you talk about how you've brought some of these things. Could you give us a preview about some of the things you want to talk about that maybe you haven't talked about in your comedy before, without going too in depth? We want to leave things to be desired, of course.
Yeah, I can. And then I might get a little emotional because
yes.
I'll tell you, when you start, like when I started writing this, you start tapping into memories and stuff that you have not really faced for a long time, of not dealt with emotions for a long time. So I talk a lot about my mom, losing my mom, my dad, being an orphan, being an immigrant, and having to adapt to sort of shift a lot of the things that you believe to be true. You sort of have to kind of look at it through different lens. And I talk about that. I talk about having to rearrange love. I've been married 24 years. And marriage and any long-term relationship involves a lot of rearrangement. Yeah, whatever you put into that basket throughout a long-term relationship. So I talk about that. I talk about being an immigrant and having to, people think there's this perception of immigrants. And I'm like, I've faced a lot of, I would say, discrimination for different things. And I'm like, what are they? No. but you put all of that, and I'm guilty of some of it too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
especially if you've once you have, it's kind of, I talk about it, once you assimilate enough, you start to kind of also take on some of the bad sides of the assimilation. Because I've seen it even with, my parents. We came here over, 25 years ago. I mean, we came here a long time ago, and I've seen discrimination throughout my life of, with their accent, people saying, I can't understand your parents, or, and different things like that. But it's also interesting because, seeing them now, they're in this place where they're like, we're basically Americans.
Right.
We go to Costco. Like, I'm like, who are you?
And they're now saying, I don't understand what she's saying. I don't understand what they're now guilty of doing that. You know what I mean?
And it's kind of like, you get to this point, you strive to assimilate, but then you just take on these other sides of it. Yeah.
And it's a grieving process too. Because now it's like you are becoming this different person. You know what I mean? You're taking on this whole new identity, and so you have to grieve and mourn the loss of what you thought you were, or who you thought you were, the things that you. So it's been a real sort of journey for me of acceptance, of recognition. Like I was in denial for a long time. I'm like, this is not my home. I'll never refer to this place as my never. Now I'm pronouncing my R's.
Oh, there you go.
And my G's, because I'm like, I'll never, as opposed to never. So it's been a journey, and I feel my one-woman show allows me the opportunity to deal with those things in a different level and really reach inside and share about stuff like that.
So you've been doing a lot of reflecting, and something we talked about off camera before we got on camera was finding voice and kind of the difficultness. I mean, we talked about it off camera, but I'll talk about it now again, is that for me, when I was doing comedy, I really leaned into this idea that, I was the Russian person. I was, that was me. Because growing up, that was, people wouldn't pronounce my last name, Pavlinskaya. They would just say the Russian.
Yes.
And as especially now with everything going on in Ukraine and Russia, I've met so many more people from that side of the world, and I feel different from them. And I feel like it's a different type of, I don't feel like I identify all the way with them, and it's this interesting thing.
Yeah.
And in that, I've also then struggled to discover what my real voice is, because we in comedy, especially starting out, will fall into different caricatures. I think, if you're single at the time, they'll make their whole thing about being single.
Right.
It's just that this is anyone who is listening to this or watching this that's a comedian has seen this. When you're starting out, you kind of go at like a surface level of who you are. And especially ever since I stopped and have thought about coming back into comedy,
She should.
I have had, been a tough time to really identify the way to be more complex to talk about the things I want to talk about. So, when we were talking about finding your voice and the journey to finding your voice, what for you has been some of the things that have helped you finding your voice other than just life experience?
Finding my voice. There's so many things I want to say because you said so many things, and I was like, yeah. In terms of knowing who you are, and it took me a while, because when I started comedy, I was still very, very Trini. So I would talk a lot about compare the different cultures, and I would do a lot of that. Like, it was grounded in that comparison thing. I was so concerned about my accent that some things I would want to say and I would not say it, because I'm like, they're not going to get this word because I don't know how to say this word. And I remember once sharing this with a friend of mine, and she was like, you should do accent reduction. And I did. So I've done the training, because the truth is, it's not that I'm losing my identity, but I'm losing the audience. I remember I said something, I did an event, and I said the word red. And nobody understood what I said.
Wow.
I got off the stage and they were like, what was it? And I said red. And they were like, what? I'm like, I don't know how red? Like, I was like, well, how else do you say red? but and my name. So you talk about your name, like I started as Cindy Ann Boisson. People would butcher my last name. People would call me Cynthia. I changed it to Sin. I've had like 4 different names since I've been doing comedy. And then I never felt there was representation for me. I kept looking around. I'm like, there's no Trinidadian with this accent globally doing this. Like, I need someone I can talk to ask them how they did it. But there is no one. And I would say, like, within the last year, I'm like, I am the representation. I am from Trinidad and Tobago. I am an immigrant. And some people aren't going to understand everything I have to say. Those who are interested and who are listening are going to understand what I have to say. And it took nights. I mean, I'm getting emotional about it because it's tough when you stand before a group of... I very rarely perform for Caribbean or Trinidadian people. You know that. And so that I get there and I take a deep breath. I'm like, I remind myself before I go on stage, who am I? What's my message? Who's my audience? I'm like, the people who want to hear what I have to say will come to me because I'm speaking English. I may not pronounce every word as an American.
But most Americans can't pronounce words as Americans.
But I'm not that.
Yeah.
And so me kind of getting on stage and not saying certain things because I'm like, they're not going to get it. I am doing myself a disservice, and I'm also doing Trinidad and Tobago a disservice, and I'm very proud of who I am and where I'm from. And so having that acceptance, understanding who I am, and it also helped that I was able to get through some doors being me and not being anything or anyone else. People seeing me and being like, oh, where are you from? I'm like, Trinidad and Tobago. I'm like, my God, I love your accent. I love that. Have you ever done this? Well, you should check this out. And now I'm like, I opened for like Michel Buteau. I worked with people who were not the same at all. Different cultures, different backgrounds, different belief systems. But somehow we made the same people laugh. And that's to me was, heartfelt.
It's beautiful. It really is, because there's something to be said about, people talk about, they're like, representation matters. And I feel it in my own experience. And sometimes I feel like that, feeling like you are capable of providing that representation can sometimes be extremely empowering and can push you.
Yeah.
Because I've found in my own experience, although I have not gotten there yet, growing up, we talk about different cultures in the United States who have found ways to create their own cultures within movies, through TV shows.
Yeah.
You have Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's it's this beautiful love story to Asian culture, and you've seen a lot of Latin writers who are creating roles for Latin people that are outside of just being a stereotype or anything like that.
Right.
And I've seen in my own experience just a lack of that with Russian, Eastern European people, because anytime you see someone who is Russian or Eastern European, they're either a mail order bride, a spy, a criminal, maybe a figure skater or an astronaut. Maybe. Those are like the only twos that are like, okay, acceptable. But, and I felt this push where it's like anytime I'm thinking like, oh, I just got to settle in. Like, I don't need to be doing the most.
Right.
I do come back to it and say, well, that is not there yet.
Yeah.
And I could provide that. And when you talk about just Trinidad and Tobago, I think of Nicki Minaj.
Right.
That's like the most famous person from Trinidad and Tobago. But it's like it doesn't just have to be Nicki Minaj.
Right. There's so many famous Trinidadian. I mean, I'm not taking anything.
Yes,
I'm not taking anything. But Nicki would be
Carlton. Yes.
I mean, there's so many.
Yes.
Cardi B is half Trini.
Yeah.
Miss Universe 1977.
Yes.
I think it's 77,
Yes.
78.
And Trinidad and Tobago has a female president, which I found out about yesterday.
We did.
And I was like, that's awesome.
Yes, exactly. So
Yes.
even stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I was having this conversation with a few friends. I'm like, when Obama won, and they were like, oh, we have the first black president. I'm like, I've only ever known black presidents. So things like that, for me, it's like, yeah, we did it. I'm like, well, we've been doing this, you know? So stuff like that. Sometimes I used to. I would not say anything because I'm like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything. Now I'm like, no, I'm not going to deny myself, my culture and my heritage.
Yeah, well, do you think that you wouldn't say stuff because you wanted to fit in, or what was was it just that you didn't want to be pushy, or, you know,
a combination.
Yeah, because I think it's an interesting thing about this idea of restraint.
I think part of it too is conflict. I was just like, you know, if I say something, then somebody's going to come back with something else, and then I'm going to have to say something else, and then we end up in this conversation, and 2 minutes in, I'm like, I don't even I don't even want to talk about this with you, you know? So it's easier for me to be like, oh, okay, that's amazing. Oh, that's wow. And then just leave. Sometimes I feel the need now to say exactly who I am. Not sometimes. I say who I am. I say where I'm from. I say it. And the truth is, I have found greater success. You know, in doing that, people relate to me more, as opposed to me kind of shying away from it or not being as bold and proud about it, because people can tell. You know what I mean? They're like, well, if she isn't too happy or pleased or proud about it, then why should I be?
Yeah.
Now they embrace it. You know, people come up to me and we have different types of conversations. I also have become very different when I walk on stage, because now I'm walking on stage with purpose. I know who I am. I'm no longer thinking, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? No, I know what I'm going to say. I know what I'm going to do. And if someone doesn't get it, then we have that conversation on stage.
One of my favorite things that I've seen you perform a lot. I've gotten to, you know, it's been a while, but I've been lucky to get to see you perform. Yeah. One of my favorite things that you have done is, because crowd work is this type of thing that people talk about now, and it's like, it's become a buzzword in comedy. But your crowd work is it comes from this place of like experience, you know, a little bit of like maternal instinct. And I've seen you really kind of give advice to some people. So it's funny, I have girlfriends who I talk to all the time, and I like to think I'm very wise.
Right.
But I kind of wanted to hear your take on something that is very popular with a lot of my lady friends, that they're always seeking advice about. So have you ever heard of like a situationship? Do you know what situationships are? I want to know your take on situationships, like, you know, and this whole idea of situationships.
I think every ship is a situationship.
Hot take.
Explain. I do, because situations change in every ship. You know what I mean? So it's all situationship. I think that should be the umbrella for relationships, situationships, and then you have, what type of situationship are you in? I'm in a marriage. I'm divorced. I'm separated. I'm in a polyamorous.
Yes. There's
polyamorous,
yes.
Right? I'm in that. But I think it's all situationship.
Yes. And so what do you think about, you know, I have a lot of friends who they will go back and like beat the dead horse. They're like, in these situations, they're like, I think he's going to want to make me his girlfriend or whatever.
Oh,
like, give me your take on this.
Listen, I sincerely believe men make a decision immediately. We are the ones who are like, I don't know if he's the one. Men see a woman that they are going to marry, and they're like, that's going to be my wife. And if you have been with someone 7 years, 7 months, and they're just like putting around, like, I don't know, how about if we see when the next full moon is before we have this conversation? Let's, you know what? I feel like if I'm getting like some sort of gluten allergy, and let me work this out with my doctor, because I would hate for us to get married on my wedding day. I eat gluten and then I pass out, and then what are we left with? Or kids to have this, for me to pass this on to my, once they start making all the, they could come up with some real Men can say, oh, I fell asleep because I was about to call you and then I drank in error. I drank a bottle of NyQuil. Like, who does that? I am sorry, but I meant to call you. Just walk away. Men know, I'm telling you, men know. Yeah, so that would be my advice.
Like, I know I butchered that. I tried. Cheers. Thank you so much, Cindy Ann. And I'm gonna try some of this food, which I know, there's gonna be some spice, there's gonna be some flavor. Before we get into it, I want to know, what am I in for? What you recommend here?
There's doubles. So doubles is like chickpea.
Okay.
Like curry chickpea, and you get it like with a dough, like a bara.
Because there's an Indian influence.
There is.
Yes.
We have a heavy influence in Trinidad, and this restaurant in particular. And I don't know what they have for food, but sometimes they have like Creole, what we call Creole food, like stewed chicken or fried fish and callaloo and macaroni
I'm ready.
pie.
I'm ready.
What you guys call mac and cheese, we call it macaroni pie.
Oh.
And sometimes they have pilau, but we'll see. And then there's snacks that you can try too.
I'm excited.
Yes.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. This was the Analyzation Show with the lovely Cindy Ann. And Cindy Ann, I am so excited that we were able to have this conversation, but I'm even more excited to try some of the food here. So, you know what? Cheers to a great conversation.
Let's dive in.
Let's eat. Okay, what am I trying right now?
You are having doubles.
Okay.
So it's chickpea, it's spicy. Has cucumbers,
so good.
has cucumbers in it. There is...
I could have gone a little bit more spicier. You were worried about me. Listen, I eat food. This is very good.
There's cucumber in it, tamarind sauce, shadow benny. You know what shadow benny is? You guys call it culantro or cilantro. Right.
That's really good.
Yeah, you enjoying it?
It's really good.
Good.
Yes.